In this video, I'm going to give you an overview of the Flames documentation. I'm also going to talk to you a little bit about the different ways to access the documentation and how and where documentation is installed on your computer. I have the Flames launcher open right now, and I have it open to one of my projects, a project that I call Tutorial. You can see here the icons that are available to run applications and documentation, and some of these icons are for documentation. So we've got the main Flames documentation and some other documentation. I'm going to talk to you about each of these, but first let's talk about the Flames documentation. So if you click on that icon, it will open up the Flames documentation in a web browser. The web browser will be whatever your default web browser is on your computer. So all the Flames documentation is written in HTML format so that it can be viewed in a browser, and it is installed locally on your computer, as we'll talk about in a little bit more detail later. This document is the main Flames documentation. It's documentation for the Flames product, and all of the manuals for all the different products that are available for Flames are documented in this single manual. The Flames developer, the Flames engine, all the engine applications, and all the Flames engine options are all documented in this one manual. So first of all, let me give you a little bit of an overview. We have these manuals. We talk about them as if they're individual manuals, even though they're all merged into one big HTML system. First, we have the Getting Started manuals. And these are really useful manuals for getting oriented to Flames. If you haven't already, I'd recommend taking a look at the Flames overview and the topics here. This gives you a top-level view of Flames and all of its various options and products. Setup and administration information is here, and there's a lot of information. Most of this is taken care of. In fact, all of it's taken care of by the Flames launcher, but if you have a question about what's going on behind the scenes or you want to do something special, you can go in here and take a look at this, and this will also give you information about how and where Flames products and projects are installed on your computer. And then we always have a section in here that describes the new features of the latest version of Flames, whatever version this documentation is written for. So that's useful if you're an existing customer and you're upgrading from a previous version. I should mention that this documentation, it's very extensive. It's close to 2,000 pages if you were to print it out. And there's a tremendous amount of information in here, and I hope that you'll get in the habit of referring to the documentation frequently if you ever have any questions or want to know more about how to do certain things in Flames. The next set of manuals are what we call the application manuals. And the biggest of those is Forge, the manual on Forge. So pretty much everything that you'd want to know about Forge, independent of the particular models that you have loaded into Forge, just general Forge information is in this manual. And it's huge. There's just tremendous amount of information here. Fire manual, Flash manual, the icon editors, the terrain data importers. So pretty much all of the end user applications for Flames are all documented in this section. Next is the developer documentation, and this is extremely extensive. There's a tremendous amount of information in here. A lot of the information we cover in the developer training videos, but there's a great deal of in-depth documentation here that is really useful if you have questions about development. This is definitely the place to go. One of the manuals that's particularly helpful is the kernel, what we call the kernel subroutine reference manual. This has a document on every single function that is available in the Flames API. So you can just go to the search feature if you have some function that you're using and you see in the example code that we provide or the starter code that we provide, you can search on it and it'll come up, and you can then take a look at the information about that particular function. It's very useful. And again, every single function that is in the Flames application programming interface is documented in this manual. Another manual that's very helpful is the Joule Developer Manual. Oh, I should say, this is all the kernel subroutines. There are some other additional functions that are in other particular pieces of Flames. For example, there's additional functions for Joule that are documented in the Joule Developer Manual. And then some of the options also have their own functions. So it's not really true that every single function in Flames is in this manual, but most of them are here. And together with all these manuals, every function that we have is documented in the manuals. Next, option manuals, and there's a separate manual to provide additional information on the various options that are available for Flames. So if you're working with a particular option, if you want to get more information about that, you would go to one of these manuals. Because all this information is available in this manual, the options, when you install them, do not themselves include any documentation. Because you get all the documentation when you install the Flames developer, because this manual is installed. So there's not any additional manuals that come with any of the Flames products. All the products are documented in this manual. So now I'm going to go back to the launcher and my project entry in the launcher. And you can see that in addition to the Flames documentation, there are some other manuals here. These are the manuals that go along with the content. So not every content item in the store has documentation associated with it, but some of them do. So when you install the content, you have the option of installing the documentation that goes along with that content if that documentation is available. So as you know, the content for Flames is not actually officially part of Flames. It's available in the Flames store. You can download it and use it, but it's not officially part of the Flames product line, which is why this documentation for content is not included in the Flames documentation. There's separate manuals for each type of content or each content item. So we're going to talk about those in a moment. We're going to get into more detail on those, but I'm going to first change gears here just a little bit and talk to you about different ways to access the documentation. One of them is the one that I just did by just clicking on one of these icons here, and it'll open it up in a browser. You can also get to the documentation directly from within Forge. So here's Forge open to the tutorial single shooter scenario. And you can see I have everything loaded here. On the main menu bar of Forge, there's a help menu, and you can select Flames documentation, and that will take you to the exact same document that we were just looking at. So that's another way to get to the documentation. And some of the other Flames applications also have a help menu like this that allow you to open the documentation. They all take you to that same Flames document. But there's another way to get to the documentation that's even more handy, and that's through the context-sensitive help buttons sprinkled throughout Forge. Pretty much every window in Forge will have these little question mark buttons on them. And these buttons will open up the exact same Flames document, but it will take you to the topic in the document that describes the particular window on which this button is located. So for example, I'll click this button right here, and I'm on the units window, and I'm looking at the command editor. So this opens up the browser straight to the topic for the command editor. You can see the breadcrumbs right here. It shows you where you are. We're down in the Forge Users Manual under Editing Units and Editing Unit Commands. So here's the table of contents over here. So the table of contents expands to the location of this topic. So here I usually get a screenshot, and then I'll have a detailed information about the particular topic that's there. So we have tremendous amount of documentation about Forge and about most of the windows in Forge. So if you're on a window and you want to get more information about it, again, you just click the little help button right here. And that's, again, you'll see these buttons all over the place. So here's scenario settings, and I have the scenario execution settings selected. So if I click on that, the manual opens up to scenario execution settings. And again, the table of contents expands to the location of that. You can't see it. It's scrolled down lower, but here is the scenario execution settings. And again, you get a detailed description of all the settings. So if you have any questions about Forge or anything about the details in there, this is a tremendous resource for you. So I'm back to the launcher now, and I want to talk about these manuals, the manuals that come with the tutorial content and the starter content. And the tutorial content and the starter content both use the component interfaces. So whenever you install either one of those contents, you also get the manual for the component interfaces. So like the Flames manual, if I click on this icon, it will open up the tutorial content. So let me go ahead and do that now. So here's the tutorial content documentation. It's a separate HTML site or set of files. And here we're documenting all of the individual models that come with the tutorial content. Now, we don't put a tremendous amount of energy into this documentation because it's stuff that we just give away for free, but it is helpful sometimes if you want to understand a little bit more about the tutorial models. You can get information here. So let me, for example, go to platforms, and here's the FEX ground vehicle. So there's not much information here about it, but it tells you the user interface and what the parameters mean. And it tells you what kind of interfaces are supported by this model, which is pretty helpful, and what other models this model can use. This is actually talked about in more detail in the developer's manual on interfaces and also on composing units and about interfaces. So we've got this manual, the tutorial content documentation. The tutorial manuals are models are very simple. So there's really not much to say about them. However, the starter content, those models are quite a bit more complicated, and the documentation on those models is a good bit more extensive. So if I, for example, go to the fixed wing model, I've got a lot more parameters here. And in this case, I've got some information even about the algorithms that are used for modeling the motion of a fixed wing platform. So you can go to this manual and look up the models, again, by going to the launcher and selecting the manual. You can also get to the topics in these content manuals sometimes from the Forge application. So I'm going to pull Forge up. And some of the tutorial models don't have these little buttons on them. We'll fix that in a future version, but many of them do. And if I had the starter content up here, pretty much all the starter content will have these buttons here. So right now I'm looking at a model, an airspace model called FEX Zone. It's one of the models that's included in the tutorial content. So this is not actually officially part of Flames. These parameters here are defined by the model, not by Flames. So I can't document this particular model in the Flames documentation because Flames doesn't know anything about this model. This model isn't available until the DLL that contains the models load in Forge. But the model itself has its own user interface, and part of that user interface is this same little help button. And this help button has been implemented to be able to go straight to the documentation, not the Flames documentation, but the content documentation, the tutorial content documentation, and go right to that topic. So now you can see I'm in the tutorial content documentation. I'm in the environment models, and here's zone, and here's a description of that model. So not all the models will have that, but a lot of them do. And when they do, you can click on it and you'll go straight to the documentation for the model in the appropriate manual. Now, one of the things that these manuals have built into them that's really handy is there's cross links between the manuals. So within the manual, I can click on this and it'll take me to another model within the manual. But I can also, this manual also links to topics in other manuals. So these go straight to the Flames manual. So this is going to go open up the Flames documentation and take me to the topic on the comm device. So that's another really nice feature about our manuals, even though the content manuals are separate manuals. and they're installed separately. These manuals have links between them, and as you click on these links, you'll automatically go to the proper topic within the respective manual. So it's a really nice help system. And by the way, I'll put a little plug in there. We use Adobe's RoboHelp system to create our documentation, and I have to say that we recommend it pretty highly. And there's actually a way for you to write your own documentation with Adobe RoboHelp for your models. And if you put your documentation in the right place, you can have your models actually be opened from within the Flames application, just the way ours do, through context-sensitive help buttons. And you can cause your manuals to cross-link to our manuals to provide additional information on some of the topics that you have in your manuals. So it's a really nice help system. So let me finish up this video by giving you some information about where documentation is installed. So for that, I'm going to go to my library, and I'm going to look at the Flames developer, and let's say that I want to install it. So you've done this already. You see that when it comes up, it gives you the list of items that are included in the installer. And so you can see here's the Flames documentation. That's the documentation that we've been looking at. So if I select that and I hit next, since I selected the release, it's going to ask me where do I want to put the release. And since I selected documentation, it's going to ask me where I want to put the documentation. By default, this path is the Flames Launcher home folder. It's the place where the launcher stores all of its files, which includes the configuration files for the launcher and the release, the Flames releases, and also the documentation. So there's a documentation folder in the launcher. So all the documentation by default gets installed in this central location. We highly recommend that you just leave that alone, but if there are special cases where you want to put the documentation somewhere else and you know what you're doing, you have the option of changing the path. I'm not actually going to install it. I'm just going to cancel it right here. Just wanted to let you know that. So if you install products that have the same documentation, for example, the Flames engine, it also has documentation. I don't have it downloaded here. It turns out that the engine documentation and the Flames documentation for the developer, they're both installing the full up Flames documentation. So if you happen to install a given version of the Flames developer and then you later install the engine, you don't have to install the documentation for the engine because it's the exact same document and it's going to get put in the exact same place. Similarly, if you install content, so here's a tutorial content and I say install, I have to pick which project I'm going to install it in, and then it shows me that this has documentation. That documentation, as I've already described, goes in that same central location as well. If you happen to install tutorial content in multiple projects, the same version and architecture of the tutorial content, really just the same version is all that matters. There's no reason to install the tutorial content documentation each time, because while the components and the scenarios go into your project folder, the documentation goes into that same central documentation folder. So all the documentation is in that central place. So that's just a little bit about installation and where it gets installed. If you really know what you're doing and you want to go to a given project and you want to change where it gets the documentation, you can go here and change that path. And this is now the specific path for the documentation for this particular project, this version of Flames. So that's all there. But again, I highly recommend you just leave that alone and let Flames put the documentation where it wants to put it, because it's all set up to all work. And by having all the manuals in the same place, that's what allows the manuals to cross-reference and cross-link to each other. The last point I want to make here is that we purposely install the documentation locally on a computer. Someday it may also be available on our website, but the priority for us is to put it locally on a computer. That makes the performance really good, but the other thing that this allows us to be able to do is when you are installing Flames on an offline computer, the documentation will also get installed on that offline computer. So you'll have access to the documentation even though you don't have internet access. So that's a really important feature for us. We have a tremendous amount of support built into our system for working offline because a lot of our customers are using Flames in labs where they don't have internet access. So that's a good overview, I hope, of the Flames documentation. I hope you will refer to it often. We put a lot of money and time into making this documentation very thorough, and I think you'll find it to be one of the many nice things about Flames, one of the things that sets Flames apart from other products, government owned as well as commercial products, is the volume and the quality of our documentation. Thank you for watching, and thank you for using Flames.